In the final hours of Queen Elizabeth I, England's most celebrated monarch, the truth was far darker than the myths we've been told. Her body wasn't simply failing with age, it was rotting from within, poisoned by the very beauty rituals that defined her reign. And hidden among her belongings was a letter so disturbing, it was locked away for centuries. What really happened inside that chamber at Richmond Palace will change everything you thought you knew about the Virgin Queen. Don't forget to like and drop a comment, that really helps more hidden stories from around the world reach you. And subscribe. 99% of viewers watch and don't subscribe, but signing up ensures you catch our next gripping tale. What the courtiers discovered inside Richmond Palace on that cold March morning was not the dignified death of a queen, but a nightmare scene that few dared describe. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen who had ruled for nearly half a century, lay in a chamber filled with the stench of decay, her face cracked beneath layers of poisonous makeup. By her side rested a sealed letter, its contents so alarming that it was hidden away, never meant for the public eye. This was not the ending of a monarch celebrated in glory, it was the unraveling of a legend. Whispers quickly spread through the court. Elizabeth had not died peacefully, but as the victim of a slow, self-inflicted torment. Her once alabaster skin was disfigured, her teeth blackened, and her hair nearly gone, leaving behind a figure unrecognizable from the radiant queen who had once dazzled Europe. The letter hinted at confessions, desperate words scrawled by trembling hands, that suggested her death was far more sinister than history ever recorded. To the few who saw her body up close, it was as if they had stumbled upon a living corpse long before death claimed her. But this grotesque discovery was only the final act of a tragedy decades in the making. Elizabeth's end was not an isolated moment of horror, but the culmination of a life haunted by blood, betrayal, and impossible demands of power. To understand why England's most famous queen died in such torment, we must return to the very beginning, her birth into a dynasty built on executions and fear. And it was there, in her childhood, that the seeds of her brutal final days were first planted. How does a child grow into one of the most powerful monarchs in history when her very existence began in blood? Elizabeth Tudor's story started with betrayal and execution, as her father, Henry VIII, destroyed anyone who stood in the way of his desperate quest for a male heir. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was branded a traitor and led to the scaffold when Elizabeth was just 2 years old. The image of a queen's head falling by the sword was the first shadow cast over the young princess's life. From that moment, Elizabeth's survival would depend on learning the brutal rules of power. Declared illegitimate and stripped of her royal title, Elizabeth grew up in a court where loyalty meant nothing and affection could turn into death overnight. She witnessed stepmothers vanish into annulments, divorces, or executions, each lesson teaching her that love was fleeting but control was everything. Surrounded by whispers, plots, and the constant threat of betrayal, she became a master observer. Every look, every gesture, every word at court carried meaning, and Elizabeth learned to read them as if her life depended on it, because it did. These early traumas shaped not only her paranoia but also her relentless determination to rule. Her obsession with image, her refusal to marry, and her ability to manipulate perception all stemmed from the bloody foundations of her childhood. Elizabeth did not inherit power, she carved it from a world that wanted her erased. But the scars of those years would never fade, and in time, they would lead her down a path of vanity and desperation that turned fatal. And the turning point came not in her childhood, but in her battle with a disease that would scar her forever. What if the disease that nearly killed Elizabeth I at 29 was not her end, but the beginning of her downfall? When smallpox struck the young queen in 1562, it left her disfigured in ways no monarch could afford. Her once celebrated beauty, described by ambassadors as radiant and flawless, was suddenly scarred with deep pockmarks. In an age when appearance was seen as proof of divine favor, this was not just a personal tragedy, it was a political disaster, and Elizabeth knew it could cost her crown. Desperate to preserve her image, she turned to a dangerous solution, Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic made of lead and vinegar. Applied in thick layers, it concealed her scars and restored the illusion of her alabaster skin. But what no one realized was that this daily ritual was slowly poisoning her from the inside out. For Elizabeth, beauty wasn't vanity, it was survival. Every stroke of paint on her face was a shield against political weakness, but also a dose of poison edging her closer to destruction. This choice trapped her in a deadly paradox. Without makeup, she risked losing power. With it, she guaranteed a slow, torturous death. The woman who had once wielded her beauty as a weapon now became a prisoner of it. Elizabeth's mask of power would soon harden into a mask of death. But the real horror lay in the poison itself, substances so toxic that modern science would label them among the deadliest chemicals known to man. And those very toxins became her silent executioners. Did you know the very cosmetics Elizabeth used contained some of the deadliest poisons known to humankind? Her daily routine included layers of lead-based powders, rouge laced with mercury, and even traces of arsenic. These substances didn't just cover her scars, they seeped into her skin, her blood, and her brain. Unlike a dagger or poison chalice, this was a weapon that worked slowly, silently, and relentlessly. Elizabeth's beauty became her most faithful executioner. The symptoms appeared gradually: constant tremors in her hands, splitting headaches, violent mood swings, and terrifying hallucinations. Courtiers whispered about her erratic rages and sudden moments of confusion, but few dared connect them to the mask she wore every day. Her once radiant hair fell out in clumps, her teeth blackened, and her skin cracked beneath the thick, chalky layers of paint. Yet, she continued the ritual, convinced that abandoning it would expose her weakness to enemies circling the throne. By the 1580s, Elizabeth wasn't just ruling a kingdom, she was fighting her own body, a battle she could never win. Every morning, the crown demanded a performance, hours of torture as deadly powders were painted onto her face like a death mask. And while the court admired the queen who seemed ageless, behind the illusion her body was collapsing piece by piece. But the poisons eating away at her flesh were only part of the tragedy. The queen's mind was also unraveling, dragging her deeper into paranoia and isolation. If Elizabeth's story has you hooked, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking truth. Hit like to help more people uncover the hidden cost of the Tudor dynasty. And tell us in the comments, what struck you most about her downfall? What happens when a queen becomes a prisoner of her own reflection? As Elizabeth's body deteriorated under the weight of poison, she clung desperately to an illusion of beauty. Venetian-crafted mirrors with warped surfaces were installed across her palaces, showing her only flattering versions of herself. Portraits were carefully edited, forbidden to show the scars, sores, or hollow eyes that now marked her true face. The Virgin Queen was no longer hiding from enemies, she was hiding from herself. Behind the locked doors of her chambers, life became a theater of deception. Courtiers tiptoed around her moods, audiences were staged in dimly lit rooms, and strict rules dictated how close anyone could stand before her. The court was forced to maintain a fiction, propping up the image of eternal youth while the reality was grotesque. Elizabeth's obsession with control had turned inward, transforming her into the sole audience of her own performance. Her vanity was no longer a political tool, it was a cage. But isolation only fed the poison consuming her mind. The queen who once thrived on adoration withdrew into darkness, convinced that without her mask, she would lose everything. Every decision, every ritual, every glance in the mirror tied her tighter to the lie. And yet, her story was far from over, because the mask she wore would soon crack, revealing horrors that not even mirrors could conceal. What came next were her most torturous final days, when the illusion of power collapsed into a nightmare of flesh and decay. What if I told you that England's most powerful queen spent her final days literally decomposing while still alive? By the early 1600s, Elizabeth's body had become a battlefield of sores, lesions, and blackened teeth, the grotesque result of decades of cosmetic poisoning. Her ladies-in-waiting described the stench of decay that no perfume could mask and the horrifying sight of skin that cracked and bled beneath the makeup. The woman once praised as radiant had become a figure too dreadful for even her closest servants to face without fear. Her mind, too, was unraveling in terrifying ways. Elizabeth raved at ghosts only she could see, her mother and Boleyn, her executed sister Mary, and countless others who had fallen to Tudor bloodshed. In fits of anguish, she clawed at her own face, trying to rip away what she called her poison mask. When courtiers entered her chamber, they found a queen broken by convulsions, speaking to shadows, and demanding mirrors to confirm the face that no longer existed. The Virgin Queen was no longer a ruler, she was a prisoner of death in slow motion. Yet even in this torment, Elizabeth's pride refused to yield. She still insisted on layers of makeup, wigs, and jewels, forcing her attendants to reconstruct the illusion of majesty each morning on a body that was crumbling. But the mask could no longer hold, the poison was stronger than the crown. And as the courtiers watched her slip deeper into madness, a final secret was being written in trembling hands, a letter so dangerous it would be hidden away for centuries, containing Elizabeth's last confession. What if the most terrifying truth about Elizabeth I's death wasn't her rotting body, but her own words? Among her belongings, courtiers uncovered a letter so disturbing it was locked away by her successor, James I, and hidden from the public for centuries. In it, Elizabeth confessed that she had known for years her beauty routine was killing her. She called it a slow suicide of vanity, admitting that every layer of makeup was both a disguise and a form of self-destruction. But her letter went even further, hinting at something darker: manipulation. Elizabeth wrote cryptically about those who painted me into my grave, suggesting that her courtiers may have encouraged her dangerous rituals while knowing their toxic effects. She described moments of memory loss, decisions made in a haze, and blackouts where others may have ruled in her name. It wasn't just self-poisoning, it may have been one of the most subtle assassinations in history, carried out through vanity rather than daggers. The Queen's final words on paper stripped away the myth of Gloriana, revealing a woman consumed by regret and haunted by betrayal. It was a confession that threatened to shatter the legend of England's most iconic ruler, which is why it was buried in secrecy. But if the letter revealed the truth of her death, her legacy tells us even more. Because Elizabeth's torment did not end with her last breath, it transformed into one of the greatest cover-ups in royal history. What if the death of Elizabeth I wasn't just the end of a queen, but the beginning of a lie? Within days of her passing, James I ordered that the truth of her decline be erased. The official story claimed she died peacefully, surrounded by loyal subjects, while her poisoned body and damning letter were locked away. Portraits kept her forever young, the myth of the Virgin Queen carefully preserved. What survived was not Elizabeth the woman, but Elizabeth the legend. Yet behind the legend lies a tragedy that still echoes today, a ruler destroyed by vanity, by the impossible expectations of power, and perhaps by those closest to her. Her story reveals how history can be rewritten, how truth can be silenced, and how even the greatest figures can fall victim to deception. Elizabeth's death was not just the collapse of a body, it was the collapse of an entire age built on illusion. And uncovering that truth changes everything we thought we knew about her. If you want more untold stories like this, secrets buried beneath centuries of myth, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment telling us what shocked you most about Elizabeth's final days, and don't forget to like the video to help us bring more hidden histories to light. Your support is what keeps these dark and forgotten stories alive, and there are many more waiting to be revealed.